Let's talk a little bit about the myth of the liberal media. I'm not sure there's a single myth that's more pervasive than this one. And honestly, I've never seen even a reporter not screw up this question when they're asked about it. Recently, Jake Tapper, who I know his name sounds like a porn star, but he's not. He's a reporter for CNN. He has his own show, or he did. I'm not sure if he still does. But he was asked this question at some sort of media conference, and his response was, he was like, the liberal bias something, sometimes maybe people in Washington are part of the city in New York and stuff, and then maybe they're a little more liberal because of that, and there's a slight bias, but there's not a bias, but there is a bias. It didn't make any sense, and it was kind of hinting that, yeah, he does think there's a liberal bias. We have another example of this right here. Listen to Chuck Todd on Newsmax TV.
Bias in the media.
Yes, sir.
Is there bias in the media on the left?
I think there is cultural bias, is what I always talk about. I think the bias stems from the fact that the news media is headquartered in New York City. And I've always thought the cultural bias on issues like religion, in particular, a lot of social issues, where there's this feeling, middle America feels as if New York sort of imposes more its cultural values. I think that is what has created the perception that, therefore, all media leans left. I think culturally, it's there. I don't think it's as pervasive as some believe it's on the right, but I think the cultural stuff is what makes it a credible.
No. Here's how you answer that question. Kyle, is there a liberal bias in the media? No. Next question. That's how you do it. Now, why do I say that? Not because, that's just what I think, or I know there is a liberal bias, but I'm covering up for it, No, I say that because there's really not a liberal bias in the media. So let me go ahead and break this down for you, because the media is biased. It's just not biased in a liberal direction. So let's break this down. There are multiple biases and then kind of like sub-biases that we can talk about. There are three major ones. Sensationalism bias. We're going to come back to all these and go through them. An establishment bias, and a neutrality bias. Those are the three real biases as I see them in the media. So let's break this down one by one. The sensationalism bias. Okay, you know what that is? ISIS! How many ISIS members are there in the U.S.? 0. How many other more important problems do we have to worry about in the U.S.? 14,762. But you get eyeballs on the screen. ISIS! They're coming through Mexico and then going to Arkansas with Mexican drug cartels. I'm not kidding. That's something a Republican politician said, and then the media was like, ooh, maybe. Ooh. That's a sensationalism bias. Ebola! One person in the U.S. has it, but be afraid 17 trillion people will have it tomorrow. Ebola! Sensationalism bias. Kim Kardashian's ass. Let's do a segment on that. Yes, that also is a sensationalism bias. And for the record, I love that thing. But it is a bias, and it's not... the real news organizations should not be covering that or talking about that. And there are so many other examples we could point to of stupid little stories that they'll do just to try to get eyeballs on the screen because they have a for-profit model and they have to do that. So that's the number one bias. And that's shared by all the different news outlets. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, HLN, Nancy Grace is nothing but pure sensationalism. The nightly news, too, like Brian Williams and on the other networks, too. They all have the sensationalism bias. Okay, the next one is establishment bias. This is another one that all of them have, but in some places it embodies itself in a different way, or it manifests itself in a different way. So the establishment bias is you always treat with deference and respectability the establishment, even if the establishment is in favor of something that is insane. Like, for example, when they were talking about going into Syria to fight Assad. Remember, Obama was about to do that. Democrats and Republicans both supported it. The American people were screaming, no! It was only like 17% of the American people that said we should get involved over there. The overwhelming majority were like, no! But what did the media do? Since they all have an establishment bias, you have to treat it like, oh, well, this is an interesting question we should all discuss, and very respectable position to say, let's get involved in this conflict that has nothing to do with us and fight alongside Al-Qaeda as our allies. But they had to cover it because they have an establishment bias. If the establishment says, let's do this wildly unpopular thing, they have to take it seriously because they also want access. That's another part of this establishment bias, where they want to get the breaking story when Hillary Clinton lets us know that she's running for president. We want to be the first ones to break the story. So be nice to her. Give Chelsea a job. Pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing nothing. That's part of the establishment bias. You want to get the breaking story. You want to be buddy-buddy with the politicians because then you get the exclusive when the time comes. So again, they all have that bias. But another part of that is the Democrats and the Republicans, they each have their own media arm, their own propaganda outlet. That's part of the establishment bias. So people say MSNBC is a liberal network. Not even close. MSNBC is a Democratic network. There's a big difference. Democratic network means support the Democratic Party. Doesn't mean stay true always to progressive principles. It means support rah-rah Democrats, yay! Even when they act Republican, yay! Now, every once in a while, to be fair, there are some people who break free from that. Chris Hayes does it from time to time. Rachel Maddow does it from time to time. Ed Schultz does it from time to time. But I'd say most of the hosts on the network know what they're doing. Chris Matthews is a perfect example, and they're just saying, yeah, Democrats, oh, they're fantastic, yay. So that's still an establishment bias. Just on MSNBC, it's pro-Democratic establishment. On Fox News, it's pro-Republican establishment. And then that brings me to the final bias, the neutrality bias. That's what you see across the board on all of the nightly news channels and on CNN. So what do? Well, they're the ones who say, let me tell you the position of the Republican politicians, here it is. Let me tell you the position of the Democratic politicians, here it is. And now we're moving on to the next segment. But wait, that's not the news. That's not the news. You're just being a stenographer to the people in power on both sides and pretending like that's objectivity. But that's not objectivity. That is fake neutrality. There's a difference. That's what we call false equivalence. The Republicans say this, the Democrats say that. All right, moving on. On global warming, the Republicans say it's a hoax, and the Democrats say it's real. Okay, don't set it up like it's 50-50 when it's 99.9 to 0.1. And when it's the scientists versus the idiots. Portray it objectively, but they won't do that. And the reason why they won't do that is because they have this neutrality bias where as long as you're in power, if you're on the right or the left, we have to give you your equal say, and then we'll pretend like that's us doing our job the right way. Well, that's not you doing your job the right way. Doing your job the right way is to call a spade a spade. The media's job is to not be neutral because neutral is often wrong. I was talking about this earlier on Twitter. Balanced is often wrong. How are you going to give a balanced position on somebody saying the stork theory is how babies come to exist and how reproduction is? What are you going to give them both 50% of the time? Okay, guys, give your opinion. How are you going to find the balance between creationism and evolution? What are you going to do? Go ahead, you guys both get equal time. Go talk. One guy's like, the world is 6,000 years old and stuff, and the other guy's like, oh, what the fuck are you talking about? That's not good. It's false equivalence, fake neutrality. To be objective is to say, this guy's right, that guy's full of shit, and I'm the moderator here to tell you what is objectively true, what is factual, what is the reality. So there are biases in the media, but it's not even close to a liberal bias.